Welcome to today's Explainer. We've put together a highly visual deep dive today, using lots of animations and side-by-side photos to really unpack a fascinating structural analysis of two of the 21st century's most disruptive figures, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. We're putting politics completely aside, putting on our historian hats, and focusing on the main part of their stories, the distinct personal struggles that forged their vastly different brands of leadership.
One inherited an empire, the other inherited the ashes of an empire. This single observation perfectly frames our journey today. To understand how these two operate globally right now, we literally have to look back at the vastly different worlds they were born into, and more importantly, the extreme crucibles they had to survive to get to where they are today. Okay, let's quickly lay out the roadmap. We'll start with two worlds apart, then examine the early crucibles, trace their parallel climb through chaos, and finally analyze the nature of their battles. Chapter 1. Two Worlds Apart. It is basically impossible to understand their current geopolitical maneuvers without first looking at the exact environments where their respective stories began. On one hand, you have the bright, grainy footage of 1970s Manhattan. Think disco lights, towering skyscrapers, and immense wealth. On the other, you've got the stark, bleak, snowy streets of Soviet Leningrad. Two completely different stages. The starting lines just couldn't be more different. Donald Trump was born in 1946 into immense wealth in Queens, got an elite private education at Wharton, and bypassed military service entirely. Vladimir Putin, however, was born just 6 years later into severe working-class poverty in a city still shadowed by the tragedy of a brutal post-war siege. That led to a state education and his immediate entry into the KGB as a career intelligence officer. Moving right into Section 2, the early crucibles. As I mentioned, this explainer is really all about their struggles. How did the specific obstacles they faced in early adulthood completely forge their worldviews? Well, it boils down to this: the gilded path versus the state's shadow. One battled to step out of a father's massive shadow, while the other battled simply to survive the dark, paranoid shadow of the Soviet state. Trump's crucible was strictly the private sector. Armed with a multi-million-dollar loan, his battleground was cutthroat Manhattan real estate. His enemies weren't state actors, right? They were zoning boards, rival developers, and fierce legal turbulence, like a 1973 DOJ lawsuit over housing discrimination. It was here he learned an absolutely crucial lesson. Litigation is both a shield and a weapon. Conversely, Putin's reality was entirely removed from the free market. He found discipline in judo and his ultimate purpose in the KGB. For 16 long years, he navigated a harsh, deeply paranoid state bureaucracy. His supreme struggle was simply survival within a massive state apparatus, an apparatus that, crazy enough, vanished completely overnight with the Soviet collapse in 1991. Chapter 3. The Climb Through Chaos. The 1990s served as the ultimate testing ground for both men's survival instincts. As the decade hit, both faced immense crises. Trump aggressively expanded his way into media dominance and brand building, while Putin began an incredibly rapid, secretive consolidation of political power in a suddenly fractured Russia. It's wild to look at how their lives paralleled during this decade. In 1990, Trump faces a financial crisis so dire that his father actually illegally buys $3 million in casino chips just to help him float. Just 1 year later, the Soviet Union collapses, and Putin pivots to local politics. By 1999, while Trump is surviving via massive debt restructuring, Putin has somehow rocketed through the security apparatus to become acting president. So how exactly did they survive all this chaos? Well, Trump avoided total ruin by pivoting from a developer into a brand manager and reality star. He figured out that attention is currency. He survived by demanding to be watched. Putin, meanwhile, survived a state in freefall by offering stability at the cost of absolute obedience, violently suppressing the Chechen rebellion and ruthlessly stripping oligarchs of influence. Essentially, Trump built a spectacle, Putin built a fortress. Which brings us to our final chapter, the nature of their battles. This is where we connect their historical struggles directly to how they operate today as deeply disruptive global leaders. Let's directly compare the political methodologies they forged. Consider their paths to power. Trump is the ultimate outsider. He leveraged television fame and battled personal, financial, and legal obstacles against systemic democratic checks. Putin, on the flip side, is the ultimate insider. He climbed a state security apparatus, and his obstacles are entirely state level. Things like managing a decaying economy and suppressing domestic dissent. Because Trump's background is in brand management, his control relies heavily on spectacle, grievance politics, and populist anger. He often views independent institutions like courts or the press as personal enemies. Putin, being a trained intelligence officer, relies on controlling information and strategic military force. He didn't fight independent institutions, he co-opted them early on to just rubber stamp his authority. Ultimately, these differing paths completely shape what they view as the ultimate threat today. For Trump, the threat is deeply personal, losing relevance, facing legal accountability, or, being labeled a loser. For Putin, the threat is existential, regime change, state collapse, and encirclement by NATO forces. This explains exactly why Trump acts transactionally on the world stage, while Putin utilizes strategic subversion. It all synthesizes down to this one thought. One fought to tear down a system he felt held him back. The other fought to rebuild a system to ensure no one could challenge him. Despite completely different crucibles, both arrived at the unwavering belief that they alone could fix their worlds. Which leaves us with a critical question to ponder. As their historically forged brands of power continue to disrupt the global order today, what are we truly witnessing? Is it the triumph of the individual spectacle or the return of the absolute fortress? It's a profound thought to carry with you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep exploring, and I'll see you next time.